So, welcome again. I'm Annabelle Monzo Painter, and welcome to the Universal Business Aviation Ops Update Meetup, your source for what's impacting operations around the globe. I'm your host and moderator for today's session, May 15th, 2024. For this episode, we're focusing on global operational news with an emphasis on the very popular and very sunny Mediterranean due to the annual crush of visitors and traffic into that beautiful region of the world. We'll also have a Summer Olympics update for Paris operations since that event is already less than 90 days away, and reminders on how to get and stay mission ready and prepared for movements in and out of the always busy United Kingdom and London specifically. Well, as always, as well, we're going to include pro tips on high traffic events of note around the globe and a regulatory check in as well. So it looks like we're going to have something for everyone in today's mixed program. So, a few reminders on that front as well on how to keep track of things so you can enjoy listening to the speakers. Operational Insight blog. We encourage you to subscribe. That universal tool is always available to you, and it's going to provide some of the most in depth updates you can get on particular topics, like, for example, our Olympics information. In addition, you can get detailed destination insights and essential pre-trip planning information specific to your unique trip planning needs via our Feasibility IQ app, which is accessible on demand. Lewis, if you can do me a favor, drop links into those resources into the chat for everyone's access. Speaking of links, always popular question post-webinar or for those who end up missing out due to their schedules, that we are recording the full session. It's going to be available in tomorrow's Ops Update newsletter. Chat window, that's where Q&A will take place, and we do our best as well to try to keep the conversation going there as we go along the session, but we'll collect some questions for the end of the program. And don't forget, chat is a great place to connect with your industry colleagues, so please drop us a note, let us know where you're joining from, and say hello. Let me introduce our speakers, and we have a lot of them, so that way we can get into the program. We're welcoming back Adriel Wilson. He's an account manager for Charter Services. Adriel is going to cover Asia Pacific ops, including high traffic events impacting traffic into the region. Next up, we have Adam Hartley, product owner for Global Regulatory Services for Universal, ready as always to share a regulatory overview to get you mission ready for the new year. A warm welcome back for Crystal Leduc. She's Senior Mission Advisor on the X-Ray team. Crystal's going to provide that update I've been referencing about July's Summer Olympics in Paris. For that deeper dive into Europe news around the Mediterranean peak season ops, I'll be welcoming three Universal Aviation representatives, Dimitra Kitikopoulou with Universal Aviation Greece, Gonzalo Barona Jr. with Universal Aviation Spain, and Andreas Braccia with Universal Aviation Italy. Welcome back to all of them. You'll, of course, recognize them from last year's Mediterranean program. And let's round out the day's information overload with Jason Hayward, General Manager at our London Universal Aviation office. Finally, have to note, we're happy to have Christine Van Backus, Senior Account Manager for Charter Services, with us today as well. She's going to be a bit in the background. She's going to be helping out with the chat and to help with the Q&A at the end of the program. So happy to have everyone back with us and on to this season's news. Since we have a heavy emphasis, as I mentioned, on Europe-based news direct from our Universal Aviation offices in the region, we're actually going to start things off today with a brief look into Asia-Pacific regional ops this time around. So that means let's bring Adriel on and welcome Adriel. Thanks so much for joining us. I understand you've gathered news from some of the most popular business aviation destinations in the APAC region. Can you get us started with China?
Hey, Annabelle. Yeah, thank you. On our last webinar, we advised of a GA ban in Chengdu that was scheduled through October 24th due to airport construction. But actually, that was canceled as of March. So the GA traffic in Chengdu has returned to normal. Additionally, the FBO at Beijing's Daxing International Airport is expected to open up for international flights by the end of June. The specific date is still TBA, but it is moving in the right direction with narrowing in on an opening date for international arrivals. Currently it is still just domestic.
Great. Thank you, Adriel. So let's move on to Japan.
Yeah, so at Japan's Osaka, Fukuoka, and Tokyo's Haneda airports, the airport operations and vendors are experiencing manpower shortages, which are creating delays in some of the services such as like lav water and pushbacks. So at these airports, it's recommended to plan accordingly for your tech stops or for crews to arrive a little early to start their airport procedures for departure. And then From about January to March, Haneda's GA traffic has increased about 50%. So obtaining slots and parking requests for the schedules can be difficult. It's our recommendation to try to anticipate the need for the schedule flexibility in Haneda to accommodate the slot availability. And then while Haneda parking can be arranged for up to 5 days, it's not guaranteed to be available. If parking is unavailable, airports like Tokyo's Narita Airport or Nagoya are the best alternatives. Narita has aircraft hangars available and allows parking for up to 30 days.
Got it. All right. Thanks so much. And let's wrap up our Asia Pacific notes with the latest from Singapore.
Yeah, so Seletar airport fees are increasing as of July 1st. There's now a minimum flight departure charge of $1,100, which is going to be tied to the passenger count. Currently, the charges are applied just to Seletar, but this will be extended to Changi as well. Operators should expect handling prices to increase by about 30%. And then additionally, Singapore's FIR has become more complicated with the redistribution of FIRs between Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. It is recommended that all flights going into Singapore obtain both Indonesian and Malaysian overflights permits to prevent any delays with the airspace. And then the only really high traffic event is the F1 race in Singapore. It's currently planned for September 20th to the 22nd. Parking is going to continue to be an issue. So when requesting handling, they'd appreciate if clients can inform them about the passengers' relationship to the race. So they are going to give priority to people that are there for the race itself. And then one last thing I think I plug every time for Singapore is charter operators. The typical lead time for a new request to Singapore can take 3 to 4 weeks. This proves challenging to any operator without a valid foreign operator's permit for Singapore. So short notices permits without that already in place are not possible.
Got it. All right. Thanks so much for the Asia Pacific overview, Adriel. Much appreciated as always.
My
And
pleasure.
I'd like to move on then to Adam with our regulatory overview. Adam, welcome in. All right. Good to see you again. And I understand you've got quite the hodgepodge of information, so go right ahead.
I like it. We'll do the regulatory hodgepodge. So the first is going to be Mexico permits. Just an update on the 180-day permits that AFAC rolled out at the beginning of this year. It was kind of put out to industry as an annual or blanket style permit. But what we're seeing is that it's functioning very similarly to how annual permits in the past have functioned in the past, and that they really function more like a series of one shots. One of the driving things here is that they are crew specific when those permits are being issued. So unless you're using that exact same crew, it's very likely that you'll have to apply with full documentation again. And then, of course, the actual approval comes from the Comandante on arrival into the port. So a good attempt at reducing the friction there, but still some one-shot aspects to that Mexico permit process. Mexico ramp checks. Really, we're going to see that more in peak seasons, and Cancun and Cabo are your two highest considerations or most important considerations as far as ports are concerned. I think it's important to note that with what we've seen in the news recently with Turks and Caicos, that of course bringing anything even by accident like ammunition, a bullet in your bag into Mexico can be a serious issue for the authorities there. So always check twice to make sure that that you know what's in your baggage before going into Mexico. Going to switch gears here. There'll be a lot of switching of gears in the regulatory hodgepodge. Let's talk wrapping up the global emissions season. We're closed out with UK ETS. We're almost closed out with EU ETS. Of course, the new deadline for the EU this year was extended to September 30th, although we're working very hard to go ahead and wrap those now and complete that cycle so that we can move on into the new year. Things that our global emissions clients are still going to receive from us is a full compliance statement talking about what their carbon footprint was from the year, what was complied with, what reports were made, and then for our larger management clients, cost breakdown per aircraft to help them resolve those with their clients and with their operators. And voluntary offsets. We talk about it each year, but that we have some great voluntary offset options through a 501c3 company, which it really is the way to go on this thing, I think. But if you're interested in understanding your carbon footprint better and using voluntary carbon offsets to positively affect a sustainability strategy, please reach out to me and ask for a quote. We'll also be providing some of that information in our compliance summaries as well. Moving on to EU LISA. So another thing that's on the regulatory horizon, EU LISA is still on schedule. I know we've said that many a time over the last couple of years in these same forums, but I really think it's going to happen this year. They seem to have many of the challenges addressed. Universal is a verified or an approved and accredited transmitter, so we've made our connection to the EU LISA system on the back end and are still working on our internal system and processes. For those who have already signed up for EU LISA, I know you get a barrage of communications from them. Please reach out to us if you get something that you don't understand. I know there was just last week or a couple weeks ago, there was a series of 12 emails from the EU LISA carrier group addressing a variety of topics that people aren't going to be very familiar with as users. But this really was about back-end administration, carriers who had already had a carrier IDs being loaded into various EU LISA systems and receiving acknowledgments of that, as well as the EU LISA carrier group making connections to Universal as your service provider of choice for those connected to us. Universal was able to successfully lobby with the carrier group after 2 years to be able to communicate directly on behalf of our service provider or operators using us as a service provider. That seems like it should have been an easy thing, but it was not an easy thing. So that has taken some of the friction out of that process and will continue to be a much better deal for operators going forward. Here in the U.S., one of my favorite topics, RSP, the U.S. Customs RSP program, reimbursable services, allowing for operators and stakeholders to request U.S. Customs overtime, which is becoming more and more necessary at all these ports. Just a sign of the times, two more major ports, Buffalo and ORD O'Hare, have moved away from 24-hour service to only 24-hour service with RSP. Those will be airports that if you use frequently, you'll need to add to your RSP program. Universal will work on adding them to our RSP program. But there's been some delays. So anybody who's applying for these right now knows that the last batch has been delayed for almost 2 months now since approval. There's a difference between approved and operational. And so we have a lot of people kind of waiting in the queue for ports to become operational, not just Universal, but everybody who is approved in that last group. So be patient. There's been some challenges within customs and the group that facilitates all those things and all the signatures that need to get signed all the way up the chain of command. So you can reach out to us if you're not getting a response from the RSP group. And we will, of course, let everybody know once we are fully operational at our next 10 ports that have already been approved. Last, I'll close, Annabelle, with Coffee with Customs. On May 28th, we will be back with the GA program managers to talk all things U.S. Customs. We'd love for you to go ahead and register and start submitting your pre-submitted questions. We will be focused on getting as many live questions and in as we possibly can. That's been a very popular program. I think that there's a ton of value in getting on with those GA program managers. So just make sure to get your question in, make sure to attend and be heard. And with that, I'll kick it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Much appreciated, as always. And Adam's going to stay with us, just like everyone else on the panel, for your questions at the end. So from here, I'm very happy to welcome back Crystal. So good to see you again. Last time we heard from you was in January, and now you're back. You volunteered the first time. I bet I dragged you back for the second time. You're back to give us the latest and greatest on the Paris Olympics operational front. So go ahead, get us started.
Thank you again for having me. I just am going to be bringing some more news and about the upcoming 2024 Paris Summer Olympic Games. This is going to be taking place on the 26th of July through the 11th of August. In the last Olympics update, we went over some of the restrictions and concerns that will come hand in hand with this event. Today, I'm going to just dive a little deeper into these restrictions and some new processes that have come into place.
All right. Thank you so much for that setup. And so with that in mind, what is the latest ops info?
Okay, so if you are planning to go and operate into Le Bourget, the rotating slot periods are now active, and we also must provide a gen deck. And please be aware that the most updated gen deck needs to be sent at least 2 hours prior to the departure of the aircraft. It is highly suggested for just practice to send it 24 hours prior, because the airport authority does need to validate all of the information. Also, turnarounds for this location, if it's longer than 5 hours, it's pretty much going to be an automatic denial because of how congested the parking is. Also, there was a meeting yesterday, and it is now required to provide an intention of flight, which we need to provide them 7 days in advance. And there will also be an upcoming meeting that is set for the end of June and early July. So we don't know the exact dates yet, but there will be more updates here in the next month or so.
Let's hope so. We're getting close. All right. Thanks for that. And so continuing in a little bit deeper, what if there's a manifest change within 24 hours of the aircraft's departure? Will this affect the trip at all?
So now, if the gen deck does have a revision, as long as it is received 2 hours prior, then it should be fine. But as we suggested earlier, 24 hours prior is going to be the most beneficial for the airport authority for your trip and just for a smooth operation. It is highly suggested to also avoid any crew and passenger manifest changes. If there is a change, we highly suggest if there's a possibility of an extra passenger, go ahead and put them on. If we take them off, it's going to be a lot easier to take a passenger off than to add in a new passenger and try to get them verified. If these gen decks are not verified in the time frame that the aircraft needs to depart, just be aware that there could be a delay, which will also affect your slots. And the slots, if you get the preferred slots that you have, you want to make sure to maintain those. But if they also do not verify your gen deck and all the information in it, and this aircraft is en route, there is a high chance that the airport authority will tell the aircraft to divert to a new location, which will also greatly impact a trip.
Indeed. All right. Let's then touch on parking conditions and then those slot details that you've mentioned regarding Le Bourget.
Yeah, so in Le Bourget, they are now at full capacity regarding parking from the 26th to the 29th of July. So our team is actively coordinating some quick turn operations into Pontoise, Lima Fox Papa Tango, or Maloon, Lima Fox Papa Mike for parking solutions. As I said earlier, the slots are now open. If you would like to see how the slot rotations work, Lewis put the link into the chat earlier, so you can go into there and see how it works. But if you haven't requested your slots yet, go ahead and put in your slots as soon as possible so you can have a chance of getting those preferred slots. They are not guaranteed. And any request submitted 7 days prior to this event will more than likely be rejected. Once you receive your slots, make sure you avoid any changes because we just don't want to lose your operation is going to be put on the back of the line, and you may not get what you want.
Got it. So avoid changes at all costs.
Avoid changes at all costs.
Once you've got it, hold on to it. Understood.
Exactly.
All right. So then I know you covered this the last time you were here as well, but what are the flight restrictions in the area? Seems like this could have some big impacts, even, of course, beyond, and I know this will be of interest to some of our guests online right now, is even if they're not attending the Olympics, just flying in the region.
Yes. So the biggest restriction is going to be the closure of the Parisian airspace. So it's going to be during the opening and closing ceremonies. The closure is going to affect some of the locations, the ICAO locations inside the Paris area, as well as affecting long haul flights. If you want to check out what locations are going to be affected, in the last webinar, we did cover base on which exactly is going to be affected, but it's also on the link that Lewis sent over to us.
Got it. All right. Good reminders and good advice. Let's go delve into recommended repositioning at airports.
Okay, so as I said earlier, again, just recapping, our team is actively coordinating into Pontoise and Maloon. We want to remember that these locations are only accepting Schengen flights, which is essentially kind of domestic flights because they're not airports of entry. And Gendex for these two locations must be sent out 4 hours prior to departure. Another great location is going to be Albert, Lima Fox, Alpha, Quebec. But the parking is already starting to get congested, but they do have some dates open. So if you want to try to get your parking there, it's a great option, and just send over a request and we can take care of that. Stansted is also a great location if you want to get away from all of the Paris chaos. But just be aware that night operations are not available in Stansted, which is Echo Golf Sierra Sierra. And you will need to submit the UK arrival and departure documents. So we want to make sure to get all of that information. Universal is able to take care of those if you guys do not know how to do that. Just make sure to tell your team, hey, we need you guys to submit the UK GAR and we can take care of that.
Okay. How about recommended drop and go airports?
Okay, so we do have a few options for quick turns for the Paris Olympics. You can still request parking in these locations, but more than likely it's going to be a no. So Marseille is going to be the first one, Lima Fox, Mike Lima. And then Marignac, which is Lima Fox Bravo Delta. And both of these locations are 24-hour airports.
Got it. Excellent. Thanks, Crystal. All right. Other options to move around this area in terms of transportation during this event?
Yeah, so we also touched base on this on the first webinar, but the first option is going to be professional ground transportation. There's going to be a whole bunch of congestion because everybody wants to see the Olympics. Sometimes it depends. But since road congestion will be high, there's going to be a need for knowing the back ways, knowing how to kind of revert to a different location. And professional ground transportation, they know all of that information. And those will be the best options for your clients, for the crew, or whoever needs it. If you guys do need it, please also get with your team and we can send over any of the quotes. And we are more than happy to do that. But just be aware that in prior events, sometimes the transportation services will charge a full day of transportation. So just expect very high quotes. Another option is going to be a helicopter transfer. So the drive from the heliport du Paris to the center of Paris, and it doesn't include traffic. Excuse me. So the first one is going to be Le Bourget, Lima Fox Papa Bravo, which is going to be 15 minutes. Albert, Lima Fox Alpha Quebec, 45 minutes. Pontoise, Lima Fox Papa Tango, 20 minutes. And Vatry, Lima Fox Oscar Kilo, 45 to 60 minutes.
Okay, so more reminders there.
Yes.
Catering, I know this is always a popular topic, especially with the congestion. Catering still available to be ordered?
Yeah, so at the moment, catering is still available throughout this event. It is highly suggested from the people on the ground to at least give them 24 hours prior to your catering needs. And even at that point, it's still not guaranteed because we are already receiving a lot of requests for catering needs.
Understood. Thanks for that. All right, a very important topic, of course, unfortunately, but one that needs to be top of mind for all operators. Can you touch on security concerns around potential terrorism or protests, any enhanced security measures, especially following, for example, the Moscow terror event that unfortunately happened very recently, and also anything specific to crew vetting?
Yeah, so following the recent terror event in Moscow and concerns over potential threats in significant Europe events, this is also going to include the Olympics. We have seen a very high rise in requests for private security services. If you are considering additional security services, we recommend booking as soon as possible. The precautions that are going to be put into place is providing the gen deck and making sure that that all of the information is complete and the intention of flight for all of these trips. And remember, inside the gen deck, they also now require to have a place of birth for all crew members as well as the passengers put into the gen deck for the verification. Currently, the crew is not going to be required to do an accreditation process. But if this process is put into place, the following documents are going to be required, and that's going to be the crew ID, passport information, as well as the aircraft awareness.
Thanks, Crystal. Third-party services, anything to add there?
Yeah, so the third-party services highly consider a VIP agent. So we have air-to-ground services that are available in these locations. In doing so, it does ensure a smooth operation on the ground during this period, but the demand is very high and the agent capacity is limited.
Got it. Thanks, Crystal. A lot that you packed in there. Thank you for that. And I know you'll be staying with us for questions at the end. It's so good to see you again and appreciate your time and preparation. All right, from here, I want to definitely get us into Mediterranean peak season. And as usual, we start off with the lovely Dimitra and all of her input from what's happening in Greece. Thank you for joining, Dimitra. Such a pleasure to see you again. And I know it's like a tradition now. I get to kick off the summer peak season with a chat with Dimitra. So it's almost as good as being there, not quite as good.
Almost, huh?
So please go ahead and
Hi,
get us started.
everybody.
And what's new since last summer?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's truly a much anticipated tradition for me too. Not much have changed in the past year. It has been a fairly busy winter for Athens Airport with quite some traffic, but mainly with lots of construction at the airport as we're trying to expand to the maximum and make use of the tiniest little corner of a ramp available for parking. Meanwhile, we took the advantage of the slow season to educate our team, providing valuable training. One of them related to the newly introduced procedure of the ACDM at Athens Airport, as it's currently under trial period, but soon to be fully implemented. Our team received a thorough training from experts and is now capable to understand the concept, the background, the benefits, and the procedures of these operational chains, with the hope not only to assist efficiently our clients, but also to contribute from our part, as it's expected to significantly improve the ATC delays and the overall aircraft servicing.
Thank you for that. So any big events? I always like to check in on these. Any big events that are going to cause extra traffic congestion, anything outside of the norm?
May the 29th, we host in Athens the Conference League Finals. It's a major sports event, a football event. Even though one of the two finalists is a Greek team, Athens Airport still expects a lot of extra flights. Both airlines are carrying the fans, but also jets are carrying the major sponsors, the UEFA members, and the football club's principals. Stricter parking restrictions may apply on those days if needed, limiting traffic to quick turnarounds only, while ATC delays should be expected. And soon after, between the 3rd to the 7th of June, we have in Athens again the Posidonia exhibition. It's a biennial international maritime and shipping exhibition, attracting visitors from around the world and increasing the business aviation traffic in Athens Airport.
Excellent. Thank you. Can you go ahead and share the best practices that I know you always do share? But once again, remind us, best practices and setting expectations for parking in your region. I know we're bringing up parking. Has to be said.
Tough topic for Greece. Anyway, we have again the same limitation as the previous years. Mykonos and Santorini allowing only quick turnarounds of 40 minutes at the max, and Athens subjecting to approval any stay beyond 12 hours. An approval that's rarely received, if we must be honest. Some of you hope for a positive outcome, and I wish it for you. Or you plan to use your connection. But in any case, my advice to you would be to plan to reposition the aircraft somewhere else, book an alternate option. And if the miracle somehow happens, we will gladly cancel what's not needed. Again, the top destination for reposition is Thessaloniki, Limagov Tango Sierra, which is a 24/7 international airport with all services available, and also a vivid city with nice hotel and waterfall resorts close by for crew to enjoy themselves too. Next would be some more remote airport on the mainland and also some smaller on the islands. But these airports operate on specific operating hours and lack some facilities. So it's better, instead of providing information, to ask you to consult with our ops who will check your schedules and advise what's best for you and your operation.
Good advice. Anything to note for crew and passenger on the ground regarding services and lodging?
Yeah, an important reminder that hotels and means of transport, especially on the islands, are limited and consequently can be ridiculously expensive. Be careful, do not leave this at the last minute because you may think that a taxi will be there, but even that may be hard to find.
Good advice as well, Dimitra. So can you bring us up to date on the latest on the new hangar in Athens?
I told you about the hangar. No idea. Anyway, I'm the guilty one. Many of you have heard about the new hangar in Athens that has recently become an old hangar that has recently become available again. It's leased to and operated by a regional airline. It is huge, and it is within their plans to offer space for jets, either for maintenance or just parking. But at the moment, we haven't been able to make any bookings yet, as the space is still occupied by some of their aircraft that are grounded due to the A320neo engine issues. At some point, when space becomes available, it's expected to offer a small solution to the parking shortage we face in Athens, at least for those that don't mind increasing slightly the cost.
All right, so we will wait with anticipation.
Always.
Excellent. So if you would not mind discussing the new mandatory lounge fee and how that trend is growing.
Started with Mykonos a few years back, was implemented at Corfu last year, and now next location is announced to be Kos, starting on the 28th of May. We're following the same concept as the previous one. We have again a small lounge located outside of the terminal, having a separate screening and CIQ point, providing privacy and allowing our passengers to avoid queuing behind airline passengers. The fee, same as with the other two locations, is 2,000 euros per live passenger leg, excluding hospital, state, military, and emergency flights, and also tech stops. News was received with mixed feelings, as some object to the high fee, while others appreciate the possibility of enjoying some privacy and providing a smoother and quicker passenger flow to their principals. But anyway, it looks like it's a procedure that came to stay. And even though we don't expect other locations to be introduced this summer, I believe we will definitely see more coming up in the near future.
All right. And final takeaways on Greece operations. Any additional tips or advice?
Two important things that need to be taken into consideration. The first one is that flight plans filed off slot will be suspended by Eurocontrol without any prior notice. We're talking about flight plans filed to depart from an airport within the area of its jurisdiction, not the third countries, not the US, for example. They don't have the manpower anymore to call the operator as they did the previous years and advise prior to the suspension. So pay attention to avoid an ugly last-minute surprise. And second, Hellenic CAA has announced that this year they will be very, very strict with slot monitoring and will apply penalties to all unjustified violation. the non-shows, the go-shows, and all other kind of misuse or abuse. Proper justification, I'm afraid, is not considered to be passenger convenience, even though business aviation is passenger oriented. ATC and CAA do not share the same point of view as we do. Penalties are high, and further sanctions may occur if a behavioral pattern is noticed. So it is important to remember to change or cancel the slots that we are not using.
Very good advice for sure. And as always, and this applies to all of our universal aviation locations, Greece in particular among them, always reach out directly should you have any questions and when you're in making plans specifically so that you can get the most up-to-date information. Thank you so much, Dimitra. She's going to stay with us for questions, of course, should they come up. And then I would love to bring on Gonzalo with our Universal Aviation Spain facility. It's so good to have you back. Welcome, bienvenidos. And let's start off with events in Spain that we need to be aware of for the season that could impact traffic even more than usual.
Hello, buenos días, buenas tardes, and buenas noches, depending where you're at. Currently, the biggest impact is based on summer vacations, leisure traffic. But some events that might have some impact currently would be now happening in June, between the 21st and the 23rd. We're hosting the Formula One Grand Prix that's happening in Barcelona and Girona in the north of Spain. Then from the 7th till the 14th of July, we have the famous bull running that's called San Fermines that happens in Pamplona. From the 12th till the 14th of July, we're having the Golf Valderrama tournament that's happening in Soto Grande. That's between Jerez and Malaga. And for the first time, it's happening in Barcelona, is the America's Sailing Cup. That's going to start on the 22nd of August and should end by the 20th of October.
Excellent. Thank you. Lots happening in Spain. So since we're talking about high traffic events, can you remind us of your high volume and high traffic locations around the country and what should operators expect when booking trips into those airports?
Well, as usual, high volume locations are Ibiza, Palma, Mallorca, and Menorca are the main islands in the Balearic. Then for these locations, it's pretty much for drop off or pick up passengers, as normally they publish a NOTAM that restricts overnight to every aircraft and normally only allows a maximum of 70 minutes on the ground. That's 70 minutes on the ground. Then for big volumes on these, because of big volumes of these airports, the operators normally choose to reposition the aircraft to other airports such as Valencia, Alicante, Almeria, or Granada, which would be the closest airports to these islands. I will also want to point out that we have a new agreement for co-managing a hangar of 5,000 square meters in Malaga. Unfortunately, it's almost full already, so I don't know if they're going to have a chance to park there. And also wanted to remember that for the Balearic Islands, all of them, all the slots cannot be requested earlier than 50 days. That's 15 days prior your estimated day of arrival. So even though you have an operation happening in August, and despite sending the request today, please don't freak out and understand that no matter how much you call us and you press us, the airport authorities would not actually handle those requests until 15 days prior your estimated day of arrival.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Good reminders. And some of these things are all, I know you would love for them to be more under your control, but they are not. But it's always good to keep in mind each season. And seasonally, parking, as we were just touching on, parking always not available where we want it to be. Remind us, please, of the final hotspots for parking and then even more on the alternates.
Well, as advised before, Balearic Islands are full and will be published a NOTAM with not allowing any kind of overnight. So suggestions for repositions, as usual, would be Valencia, Alicante, Granada, Almería, or Malaga as the closest options.
Excellent. And as we wrap up for Spain, any final advice for operators heading to your region?
Well, as I always say, please try to send your handling request as soon as possible. Even though in the Balearic Island airports, parking and slots cannot be requested until 15 days prior to the arrival schedule. But it's good to have the request as soon as possible, so at least the airport authorities are aware of your desired dates. And for the rest of Spanish airports, as soon as we receive the request, we can coordinate and confirm the slots and the parking, so we can secure that reposition stand. So the earlier, the better. And secondly, but also very important, uh, try not to change the initial schedule too much. I know it's not easy, but the less changes we make, the more chances we have to get the parking and slot as desired.
Thank you, Gonzalo. I know. You will do your best to balance it all for everyone. Much appreciated and a pleasure to have you back with us. All right, so very comprehensive. I'd like to now bring on Andrea with Italy and Croatia. Welcome, Andrea. So good to have you with us again. A pleasure to see you. And, I didn't, this is the first time since last summer's uh, uh, webinar that I get to have Andrea on as a speaker, but I did get the pleasure of meeting him in person at NBAA this past fall. He was over here in the United States, so that was a distinct pleasure. So great to see you then. But now you're back to give us the latest on Italy and summer peak season travel.
Hello, everyone. So the ongoing spread of dengue virus has once again brought the disinfection requirement into focus. While it's been a long-standing obligation, the current situation necessitates renewed attention. There are two primary solutions: the residual treatment, which is effective for 8 weeks, or the pre-landing sprays at each Italian stop, which has to be stated on the general declaration. If the aircraft did not operate into high-risk areas in the previous 28 days, there is an exemption letter that can be submitted to the authorities 12 hours before landing. I understand that it's complicated to navigate into the regulation, but that's why we are here. Reach out and we will find a solution.
Thanks for that. So moving into traffic planning for this busy season, what airports are going to be the busiest, plus a reminder on parking processes and alternate airport options?
Expect bustling activity at major Italian airports such as Milan, Venice, Naples, Rome, and the entire island of Sicily. Parking arrangements remain crucial. The alternate options including Milan, Olbia in Sardinia, and Salerno Airport near Naples, which is set to reopen in a couple of months.
Thank you. Now is probably a good time as well to talk about any upcoming high traffic events, which will also have an impact on traffic.
Mark your calendars for prominent events, including the ongoing Italian Open Tennis until May the 19th, the Grand Prix in Imola from May the 17th to the 19th, and the 50th G7 Summit scheduled from June the 13th to the 15th. Additionally, there will be many private events spread in the country.
Okay, and now can you tell us more about the new airport in Salerno?
Yes, finally, Salerno Airport is reopening on July the 10th. While ticket sales by the airlines are underway, the airport operators is still finalizing parking procedures for business aviation, promising updates in the coming weeks. But at the moment, it is still not possible to book parking stands.
Moving into Croatia, what are some of the popular destinations to be aware of, and any parking updates for there as well?
In Croatia, popular destinations are Dubrovnik and Split. Split is the one with the parking problems, but there are many alternative solutions that can be explored both in Croatia or in Italy.
Excellent. And finally, I always like to wrap up with your final words of advice for summer travel into the region.
Anticipate a busy summer season, particularly in southern Italy, where finding long-term parking may pose a challenge. Salerno's reopening promises relief for traffic heading towards the Naples area, as Naples Airport suffers of strong parking limitations. If you encounter any difficulties or need assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help make your mission as smooth as possible.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and he's going to be with us as well for questions. So a pleasure to see you and have you back. And now I get to move us into the land of the United Kingdom and everything to do with London operations. The much anticipated, never duplicated Jason Hayward, live from Universal Aviation in London. So welcome back, Jason. Very good to see you. Also had you recently join us at NBAA. So let's just kick off. Go ahead, get us started with the latest.
Thanks, Annabelle. I think the biggest thing that's happened recently in the UK is changes to GAR submission, as I think Nick pointed out in the chat earlier. The primary method for submitting your information now is via the SGAR system. There are time limits. You cannot submit before 48 hours prior to the departure, and you cannot submit later than 2 hours prior to the departure as well. Now, that's important because if there are last-minute changes to a departure, for instance, that 2 hours starts again. You will have to wait until that 2-hour window has passed before you can continue with your trip. Now, more than 300 warning notices have been issued by the Border Force teams in the UK so far. The primary reasons being typos, incorrect data, and also submissions outside of the time limits. No one has been fined yet, but that will probably happen in the not too distant future for persistent offenders. And if all of that seems like a lot of work, your TSS team can take care of that for you. Secondly, thanks for all the messages telling me how great I look. It's not just down to my skincare regime, it's due to the lack of night slots and getting my full 12 hours of sleep a night that I need. The only other airport that is 24 hours in the London area is Luton, and access to GA gets switched off there on the 1st of June. So there is not a single airport in the London area that can support nighttime operations. The latest slot available at Stansted would be 23:20 for an arrival or 23:10 local for a departure. So bear that in mind when you're planning your operation. The nearest alternative is a good 2.5-hour drive outside of the city, which would be Birmingham or even East Midlands. And we had one bit of good news this year, which was to do with flexible max takeoff weights. For Part 91 operations, there is a threshold of 45.5 metric tons before passengers and crew need to be screened. We had a big kind of discussion going on for the last year with the Department for Transport, and they finally conceded to accept the concept of flexible max takeoff weights. So if you are operating a Global Express 7500 and can apply Service Bulletin 27, or if you're a G650ER and can apply one of their weight reduction processes, then just inform your FBO and they can forego the screening processes for Part 91 aircraft. And finally, you can bring us your huddled mosquito-borne diseases to Stansted. We have a fog-in product in place, which comes with certificates acceptable to Andrea and the team down in Italy, and can supply the top of descent spray as well, which is not readily available in the United States, but we are able to supply that at Stansted as well.
More amazing elements of note for Stansted, of course. Now, Jason, I hear you're resurrecting Brexit Corner for our audience. I can't wait to hear more about this.
It's back due to very unpopular demand, because as we get into peak charter season, we are still finding operators do not and have not applied for their TCO. And so they are having their request from the CA rejected. It is a lengthy and painful process, actually much like my performance review, but it is essential if you want to operate a Part 135 operation into the UK. And I should add that my homemade placards are available in our Stansted merchant store.
Always important to promote the merch. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Well, we'll field requests at the end of the webinar. Finally, Jason, with the Olympics so close by in France, do you have suggestions related to parking alternatives or news about other big events coming up soon that may need parking updates?
Actually, we have several bookings related to the Paris Olympics in Stansted already. People are looking at the drop and go option, and we have some bookings. But London, we anticipate a very busy June and July, especially. It starts off with the Champions League soccer final, which is at Wembley on June the 1st. We've been able to extend the opening hours at RAF Northolt's, which is only 8 miles away from the stadium. And so we have extended weekend hours on the June 1st, June 2nd. Wimbledon, which draws a lot of traffic, is just 14 miles from RAF Northolt as well. So if proximity is your driver, then you should definitely take that into consideration. London does have a lot of parking capacity, but it is going to be very busy. Later on in July, the Royal International Air Tattoo takes place from the 19th to the 21st of July. That then rolls into the Farnborough Air Show, which is on the 22nd to the 26th, which again makes getting into Farnborough quite tricky as well. And there's also a large head of state event slated for the end of July as well, which is going to bring a lot of head of state traffic and big aeroplanes into the London area as well.
Got it. Thank you, Jason. Memorable as always. Memorable as always. So thank you again. Much appreciate the update. And we've covered a lot and we have taken up quite a bit of time to do so, but hopefully useful for many. And I know it's been a few months since our last update. So lots of information to impart. Now let's spend a little time on questions. I know some of you submitted those in advance. I think we've even added some of the content. We had I threw those questions over to our speakers earlier in the day, yesterday, and many of them incorporated them even further into their sessions. So let's take a quick look and see what else we need to address from pre-submitted, and then I'm going to hand off here quickly to Lewis to see if there's anything from the live chat. So we just addressed a little bit on Wimbledon, and a question was posed about parking. And so, Jason, want to reiterate one more time, best airports for parking success, as this client mentioned during this event?
There we are. As I said earlier, London does have a large capacity for parking. We've still got plenty of capacity at Stansted. I think the key to it, as always with most things, it's actually just planning ahead. And I'm sure we'll be able to find a corner for you somewhere. Further afield, there's other airfields as well in the southern part of the UK, such as Bournemouth, East Midlands and Birmingham as well, that have huge amounts of parking capacity.
All right, thank you. And I know we did, of course, Andrea, you touched here on requirements for Zika in Italy. Specifically here, the question is about aircraft arriving from the United States. Is the enforcement requirement for spraying the cabin upon arrival easing at all, or is this still as already noted?
USA is in the list of risk areas, so yes, the disinfection is required. And yes, the pre-arrival sprays are a good options as they are officially accepted.
Got it. Thank you. And I know we touched on this during your segment, Crystal, but also just wanted to double check on this one because I think there was definitely activity in the chat related to this accreditation for crew. And the question specifically, if accreditation for crew is going to be required, can Universal perform these accreditations? Wow, unable to say that word. In-house, or will this be accomplished through the handlers? I know this was still a bit TBD, but if you can just restate it for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. So Christine actually dropped some additional information inside the chat. So the accreditation is done via website. At the current moment, it is not required, but there is still another meeting that is put into place at the end of June. And so there's a possibility that it will be required at that point. But if it does, the handler will just need all of those documents that I notated, which is going to be the crew ID, passport, as well as the aircraft awareness.
Thank you, Crystal. Speaking again of security concerns, the question was, what airports are most concerned with unruly activists and protesters? I believe this was directed towards more of the European theater, but I think, Jason, you had some information you wanted to share here.
I was actually just going to make the point that protests are everywhere. And I think it's just going to be a fact of life for actually several years to come. And not just in Europe, this has happened in the United States as well. Generally, in fact, in almost every instance, these protests are quite peaceful. They're more of a pain. They turn up at 8 o'clock in the morning and they finish 4 promptly. Even protesters punch cards. And it's certainly been the case in the UK that these have been very peaceful. Around the gates and main entrances, they've protested Farnborough, Luton a couple of times, and at several locations in Europe. Although there has been a couple of well-publicized instances. I think one Mustang was sprayed orange. That was in a remote airfield, I think either in Denmark or Germany. And I think most FBOs have developed, business continuity plans with their local authority and the local police who have robust plans. But it's just a fact of life, I think, that people have to get used to.
So part of your pre-trip planning and active trip planning. Thanks,
Definitely.
Jason. Good reminders all. And then I think the last pre-submitted question we're going to hit on is once again on the Olympics, Crystal, but I just want to do a time check with all of our attendees is just to note, I know we're about to reach our hour, but we can stay on for a few minutes for anything that we have in the live queue. So we'll do that maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how many we have. All right, Crystal, we'll wrap up pre-submitted with you. This is again around slots for the Olympics. Is a change in city pairs allowed as long as you do not change your arrival and departure times?
Yes, this is allowed. It's not going to affect the slot allocation, and the slots will remain the same. So as long as you don't change those times, it should be perfectly fine.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Crystal. All right, so Lewis, I think this will bring it to you for anything we have on the live question front.
Yeah, hey, Annabelle. Adam, we had a question about EU LISA. Did it receive the sys-to-sys and web portal package opened up with encryption keys, and I assume used for testing the system? Is this something that our ISP should be testing? IOC was very vague on EU LISA, and I am also curious to see what we need to be looking out for with the program going live soon, since we are fully registered.
Yep, I responded in the chat, and tried to keep that layered question as as short as possible, but just to make sure that it's understandable. The encryption keys are confusing. They have nothing to do with testing or actual functioning of the system. These encryption keys are all about securing the emails that they're sending back and forth to operators, and not functional or something you're going to need to hold on to and use. Either in the online portal, the mobile app, or with if you're using an ISP provider, Universal or other, with your system to system. The system to system testing is conducted by the organization or who's making the connection to the EU-LISA system. So if you're using a service provider, that is the service provider who's doing the testing, and not required for each individual operator that they are representing. So like we completed our testing, we're accredited, we're approved. And that's across all of our operators who have number one, have a carrier ID that they've already registered, and number two, have gone through the process of submitting the paperwork to associate them with their specific service provider. So EU LISA will not be something that you'll be able to quickly engage a third party to do on your behalf because of that formal connection and documentation that needs to be made. So if you want to use a service provider for the system-to-system connection, i.e. leverage where your manifest information and all that stuff is already being stored versus manually typing it into the web portal or manually entering it into your phone or iPad, then we need to make sure that those connections are made well ahead of time. All of the documentation that, like I said, in the update that was received in the past couple weeks, it was about 12 separate emails. If you already have a carrier ID and you are already associated with a service provider, none of those had any particular action for you as an operator. They're more notifications of things that were happening administratively in the background with the EU LISA carrier group and the standing up of all three of those different transmission systems and loading your carrier IDs into those various transmission systems that we're going to leverage as we go live with phase one, November, December timeframe 2024.
Thanks, Adam. Jason, we had a question for you. Are you aware of any movement on EGQL allowing large cabin aircraft? We have a G650ER and always have to use Edinburgh.
Edinburgh.
Ah.
It's I think I just answered it in the chat, but they should accept you as long as you can demonstrate that you are going to be operating under 45.5 metric tons. You're using, I think it's ASC 29 or through down to 26. They should accept you. Bryce Norton, which is another Air Force base, was also taking a very hard line on that too. But as I said, this was a big battle that we took part on with the regulator, and so that has been propagated out to airfields all around the country through the different notifications that they use, that you can bring the aeroplane in just so long as you're operating under that weight.
Great, thanks. I think the last question we just had was if anybody could drop the EU Visa portal web address into the chat. I think we
I'm
covered
looking to see
everything.
I'm looking to see if there's an address that's functional yet that you can actually do anything with, and I'll double check Dallas and send that. I can send that to you offline. But I don't think anybody can access that portal as of yet to register or do any action in there. Well, it'll be a little the emails they set up were things happening in the background and not necessarily asking you, operator, please register now. I don't think they're ready for that on the front end just yet.
Great. Thank you so much, Lewis and Adam. And I'll make my closing remarks. Lewis, if there's anything else, just raise your hand and we can drop something else into the questions. We can drop another question to our speakers if needed, but I'll close out now. So I really want to thank all of our panelists, number one, as always, for your time and preparing for all this information for our guests today and our viewers. So thank you. It's a pleasure to see you all. And it's like a lovely tradition for us now to kick off Mediterranean peak season with this engaging information. And of course, Jason, too. We like having you as well. Needless to say, Crystal, thanks for the Olympics deep dive and look forward to seeing when that next meeting is and if we need to drop any more information into the blog as a result. All right, so big thank yous all around, and thank you to all of you who were able to attend today. As I mentioned at the beginning, there is going to be a recording of this session available, and that's going to be publicized out. Ooh, wow. Clearly been a long morning for me. Going to have a link to this session in tomorrow's operational update email newsletter. So look for it there. You can also share it with anyone who wasn't able to join us today. Don't also forget to join us live if you can. For those of you impacted by North America operations into the U.S., Coffee with Customs. As Adam mentioned, we are going to be hosting that again with the CBP program team. That is at the end of the month on May 28th. And also, speaking of the end of the month, May 28th to 30th is eBase in Geneva. And Universal will be there, and many of these experts that you're seeing here from our European offices will be there representing. So if you are there, please look us up. We're booth R64. As always, a reminder, you can drop us a note at operationalinsight@univway.com with any topics, burning questions, or just any comments you have about the program. We'd love to see them, and they do help us inform what we're going to add and what kind of experts we bring on. I owe so many of our programming ideas to you. So thanks so much. Pleasure to see everyone. Thanks for everyone who was on camera as well. And I'll update you. Hopefully we'll see you again by September for another update. Take care. Bye for now.